Hi, welcome to VentureGrab channel. This is Eden. So during this pandemic, many businesses are having problem now. So as you know that in VentureGrab, we have a lot of business for sale, business for licensing, or even though for franchise. So there are a lot of business owners ask us about what is a franchise, what is the difference between franchise or a licensing, or whether during this pandemic you should start a franchise business. So today we have the honor to invite our special guest, Miss Geetha. Miss Geetha is the expert into trademark, IP, and also franchise business. She's from KASS International. Let us welcome Miss Geetha. Hi Geetha, good morning.
Good morning, Eden.
Yes, so today we're going to talk about this franchise. You know that in VentureGrab, a lot of people ask us about franchise, a lot of questions. So after this MCO, since this pandemic, let us discuss about this topic. Okay?
It's a very interesting topic, and especially for business owners, regardless of what your current business model is.
Okay, so Geetha, I would like to ask, many people are actually confusing about franchise and licensing. Maybe can you explain what are the differences in between both?
Sure. Actually, Eden, I think I would love to share my slides because it explains quite clearly. So let's bring business owners to my slides. And during this sharing session on franchise, we can jump from this slide to a bunch of random slides so that people understand better in various aspects on franchising. So your question is an awesome one, Eden. We get it all the time, and I'm sure you do as well, in terms of, hey, I want to license my business. And then some say, hey, let's franchise a business. And then some people say that franchising and licensing are the same thing. So here I am. It is not the same thing, and this is why it's not the same thing. So licensing, right? Okay, let's say VentureGrab. Let's take your brand, for example. Let's say another business owner wants to provide services and says to you, Eden, you've built your brand so well, it's so famous in the business world for business matching, sales, acquisition, franchising, and all that. But you don't do accounting. Let's just say an example. I want to start an accounting firm with that brand VentureGrab. So you then, wait a minute, how much are you going to pay me for my brand? So that's a license. If you say you can use my brand for your accounting business, so you're licensing your trademark. You're licensing one aspect of your intellectual property right. It could be your brand, it could be patents, if you have technology, it could be designs, it could be copyright, which is written material, artistic work, and so on. Licensing is giving permission to use a specific type of intellectual property right. That's what licensing is. So in that example of the accounting company wanting to use your brand, you say, yes, use my brand, but I'm not going to dictate how you run your business. So that is the difference between licensing and franchising. If you tell the accounting company, you can use my brand, but I'm going to tell you A to Z how to run my business, that is franchising. So all franchises have a licensing component, meaning that in any big franchise, so let's look at Mary Brown, let's look at Old Town Coffee. It's not just letting someone use the brand. That's one part of it, which is the license. They let them use the brand, they let them use all the marketing material, which has copyright, the artistic work, and so on. So they're allowing them to use intellectual property rights, but it's not just that. Franchising is allowing them to use the standard operating procedure, the operation manual, the POS system, A to Z. You are allowed to run my business in your company. You are the owner of your company, but you must replicate my business. So that's what franchising is. So earlier, I talked about, here, let me show you one more slide that's pretty much explains what franchising is. It's a cloning of another business. So that's how it's different. Licensing is not franchising. All franchises has a licensing component on it, but it's not the same thing. So in Malaysia, a lot of companies call their businesses licensing because they haven't met the 3-year requirement in terms of needing audited accounts. And that's what later on we can talk about. What's the requirement to get a franchise registered in Malaysia, right? But one of the requirements is the 3 years audited account. So we have a lot of clients or businesses coming to us and say, I can't meet the 3 years requirement, Geetha. Why don't we just call it franchising? So it's important to know that in the Franchise Act 1998, it's unlawful to run a business that is a franchise without registering it as a franchise. So that means that even though you call it a license arrangement or joint venture arrangement or whatever you call it, if the court finds you to be running a franchise, despite of what you call it, you will be still caught to be breaching the act. Whether you get hauled to court, that's a whole other matter, because it's a question of whether Malaysia enforces its law. So that's a discussion for another day. But in the act, they don't care what you call the agreement. It's basically what is the arrangement between the two business owners like. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, what's the difference between licensing and franchising, and why is it actually extremely important in the Malaysian landscape.
Understood. Okay. Geetha, for those business owners who wish to apply for the franchise license, what kind of procedures they need to follow, they need to go through, and then what should they do in order to become a franchisor?
All right. So you've got two questions there, very good questions. So Eden is asking me, one is, what do they need to do to get their business registered as a franchise? So to be a legal and lawful entity under our Franchise Act. So what I have showed here is that franchises in Malaysia are regulated. Not all countries is regulated, In Singapore, it's not regulated. There's a code of ethics. In Thailand, there's no law as well. But other countries do have an act, a legislation, and Malaysia does too. So Eden's question, the first one is that, what do you need to do to get it registered? His second question, which we'll come to in a while, is what does it take to be a franchisor? Because that's also another question there. So let's look at the procedural matters. To have your franchise registered in Malaysia, you need a franchise agreement, you need an operation manual and a training manual, how you're going to train your staff and the franchisor's staff. You also need 3 years audited account. That's the requirement that always catches out people, because sometimes they haven't been in business for 3 years yet, and they are doing so well, they're keen to franchise and replicate their business. So the 3 years audited account is a requirement. There is an exception. So the franchise registry allows for exceptions. So if you can't meet the 3 years, you can explain why you can't meet. And then they will up to them to decide whether they allow your franchise to be registered. And then you also need a lot of documentation, including your incorporation document, your company incorporation document, who are the shareholders in the company, projected accounts for 5 years to show, is your business even going to help the franchisee break even, right? So they'll actually want these documents to show that it's a franchise that is not going to make the franchisee suffer. Then they'll also ask for a prototype management account. So management account of a prototype outlet, 6 months of that account, and among many other things. So it's very much a tedious process. Among many other things, your marketing strategy, what is your unique selling point. They'll also ask for a bankruptcy check on the directors and the company that's applying to be a franchisor. So that's about 80% of what you need, and there's a lot more. So a lot of it is also financial data, because they want to see that the franchisor has a sound business. And then after you apply for a franchise, they will examine and they might raise more questions, which we can address. And then they will also come and visit your outlet and ask some questions. So there'll be an interview at your outlet before they approve your franchise registration in Malaysia. So that explains your first question, Eden. Moving on to your second question, which is, what does it take to be a franchisor? Such a good question, because you might even be in business for 10 years already. So you have totally met the criteria of being able to franchise your business. And you probably have very good track record, because you've been in business for 10 years. By then, you'll be already not even breaking even, making a good profit. But what does it take to be a franchisor? The role of the franchisor changes. From a business owner, you then become a developer or a trainer. Okay, so because at that point, when you start giving out franchises, let's say you start giving out 5 franchises, and as any business does, it takes time to learn your system, it takes time to learn your SOP, it takes time to actually run your business, a replicated version of your business. And in that process, there'll be a lot of questions, there'll be a lot of problems and challenges faced by all your 5 franchisees. So you cannot be running your own business and firefighting your own business. You just don't have the time. You will be the key person here, helping all of the franchisees build their businesses using your system. You kind of become a trainer. That's the mentality has changed. I'm not a business owner. I'm a trainer and I'm a developer, meaning that, okay, I've got them stable. Now let's look at what other areas to enter into. If I'm in KL now, I should be entering into Subang, the high net worth area. I should be entering into Putrajaya, there's a lot of potential. Or even better, Eden, is let's look at Thailand, let's look at Indonesia, let's think big. So that's what the role of a franchisor is.
Okay, so Geetha, I would like to ask, for business owner who actually run a franchise business as a franchisee, not franchisor, is there any terms and conditions that need to follow? Is franchisee business operation being restricted by any rules or terms and regulation?
All right, so as much as there's a lot of advantages in running your franchise, as a franchisee, there's lots of advantages actually. Let's go to disadvantages. And it's very important to know disadvantages. So we talk about what's the catch here, right? So this is where the disadvantages to be touched on. The disadvantages is that as a franchisor, right, we talked about the franchisor's role changing, and they then need to control franchisees. And franchisees are going to be very much kind of like entrepreneurial. That's why you take up a franchise. I don't want to be an employee. I do not want to be an employee. I want to be an employer and I want to be a business owner. But franchisees are stuck in that place where I want to do so much. I have so many ideas. I want to take a franchise. And that's where the disadvantage comes. So it comes actually here. Franchisees are not totally independent. This is, I find, through experience, one of the biggest challenges franchisees have. With all the rules, which the rules and regulations comes in the franchise agreement, then it comes in the operation manual. So those two documents are super important for a franchisee because you are replicating someone else's business. But that part where I need to follow it A to Z, because consistency is important between all franchises. This is the most challenging part for a franchisee who's very creative and has a lot of ideas to improve the business, but are restricted by running the business based on rules that the franchisor has set. And franchisor sets it for a very good reason, because if he had franchisees all doing their own things, the consistency of that brand and the consistency of the product and services they deliver will be extremely different. So there's a very good reason why franchisors also need to be strict, but this can frustrate franchisees a lot. So the other thing that's very important is franchisees is rewards. The rewards might not be what they see because it's not their own brand that they're developing. There's still fees to be paid. There's a franchise fee to be paid. There's an investment cost upfront to set up the outlet. Whether it's a hair salon or a restaurant, there's the kitchen equipment to be purchased and so on. So there's still all of this, and there's an annual or monthly royalty fees, which is a license fee to be paid to the franchise owner. So sometimes, they feel I'm working so hard, but I'm constantly paying all this money to the franchisor. So that's another disadvantage. Let's go to control. You lose control, and sometimes you lose trust on the franchisor if he's not promising. He's promising the moon and the sky, but delivering you very little. So that is another disadvantage. So you have to be very careful into who you enter into a relationship with as well, and you need to know that he's got credible statements about him. People only have good reviews about him and his character and credibility of the franchisor. In a relationship, right, when a franchisor chooses a franchisee and a franchisee chooses a franchisor, there's a huge amount of trust needed because both are running their own businesses. So it's going to be a lot of fact-finding and research done on both parties before each other enters there. And another one is the risk of the franchisee not submitting accounting details. This risk is for the franchisor actually. Sometimes very dangerous because franchisees might be under-reporting their figures.
Thanks for the explanation. So Geetha, in your opinion, compared to self-created brand, what is the biggest advantage of running a franchise business?
Right. So, we just talked about all the disadvantages. There are a lot of disadvantages, but look at the world today. I don't know, Eden, have you watched the movie Founder? Amazing movie about McDonald's.
Okay.
I don't know whether they play it on Netflix, but if they do, try to watch it. And I highly recommend it to anyone thinking of franchising the business, either as a franchisor or a franchisee. He talks about Ray Kroc and how he took the McDonald's franchise and it exploded into the US market. So the advantages of getting into a franchise is huge. Right now, what I'm touching on are advantages for the franchisee. The franchisee is the owner of its own business and owns its tangible assets. And franchisees out there, business owner out there want to hear about this, you can hear it from Eden because he'll talk about selling your business. As a franchisee, when you want to sell your business, you can speak to Eden because he can help you on that. But the fact that you can still sell your business shows that you're not an employee. You're not an employee, you're a business owner. So it still distinguishes you, even though you have so many rules to follow. Oh my God, you're like, the franchisor is constantly telling me to do this. Is it my business or is it his business, right? Yes. So that's always like, oh my God, it must be frustrating, right? Because it is your business. It's still your Sendirian Berhad. It's still your PLT. It's still your profit and loss account. It's still your profits that you keep after paying him royalty fees. But can you see, it's still your business. That's a huge advantage. So that's one of the advantages. One of the precaution I said that below in the slide is, do remember that you don't own the goodwill and reputation. To that extent, you are kind of building the brand for the franchisor, but it's worth it considering the benefits that you get in terms of it being an established brand. You don't need to do that much of marketing because the franchisor is doing the marketing. And that brings to the next one is subject to, we're talking about how the business can be sold, right? You can sell it to a third party, or sometimes in the franchise agreement, they require you to sell it back to the franchisor. But usually the agreements are drafted at a price that's reasonable, and it's not, usually there's no bullying and there's no exploiting here. So the next advantage for franchisees is that franchisees can learn the business model. So this is an advantage and a disadvantage for the franchisor. So franchisees can learn the business model, and that basically means that they can, to a limited extent, start a business adopting the same model. So this is where local fast food chains come up, and you can learn from another well-known chain, go out there, as long as you don't copy things that belong to the other party. Cannot copy the trademark, cannot copy the artistic work and the layout design and the copyright in that, trade secrets, any recipe in the food, and marketing strategies and confidential information like client details. So of course, all of that will be infringement of intellectual property assets. Intellectual property rights. But in the meantime, you can learn a whole other business model. You don't even have experience, and you suddenly come and you learn a business model with a steep learning curve. So it's steep, but it's short. And that's one of the advantages I'll talk about later as well. It's amazing how much you can learn from someone who's very much an expert in their industry or field. Another advantage is that the chances of success is high. Okay? And the reason for this is your failure rates are prevented because it's a tried and tested model by the existing franchisor. The franchisor has already been in business. He's already gone through the teething problems that any business will have, and he's fixed the teething problems. So when you come in as a franchisee, you are, and kind of like can start the engine and move fast as opposed to move slow. Because with any new business, you're learning on the go. But with a franchise, you should not be learning on the go. You should be, and as soon as you enter business, you can start running. You don't need to crawl, you don't need to walk, right? So chances of failure is small. And this is proven with data. In UK, over 25% of ordinary businesses fail, but less than 5% of franchise outlets fail. Can you imagine? So franchisees have that assurance that when I enter this business, chances of me failing is low. That's a great advantage. I talked about this earlier, about how you have a very steep learning curve, but it's a short learning curve. Again, what it means is that you achieve success faster than starting your own business. And in addition to that is you enjoy international, national, and regional promotions and advertising campaigns. So any businesses knows you can start something. You can have a great idea. You can have a great product. You can have a great service, but no one knows about it. So you don't get business, you don't get clients, and then in 1 year, lucky if you last 1 year, you shut your shop. That's the key reason most businesses fail. You might have a brilliant product or service, but it doesn't reach out to the public enough. This is where franchisees benefit, if the franchisor is doing a good job. So everything I say got if lah.
Okay, Geetha, many business owners would like to know, during this pandemic, right, many businesses are closing down. So do you think this is a good time to actually start a franchise business?
A very good question, Eden. So with the COVID, right, it actually brings about some problems, and the whole world is now suffering in so many ways. And this is why the franchise business model is perfect for during the COVID times. I say that with some disclaimers, and I'll come to that disclaimers because it can be also be said that because franchises are so expensive, how is it that people can afford it? So let me address that later. But let's first explore. There's two main reasons why during the COVID times, this business model is actually a very suitable model, very important for two parties to look at this part, which is the franchisors. Business owners should all be looking at, is it really a good business model? How can I structure my business? Because of the two facts I'm going to share shortly. And franchisees, because a lot of franchisees may be needing a franchise. A lot of individuals may be needing a franchise and therefore become franchisees. Okay, let's explore why. As we all know, markets have crashed, and with the lockdown and restricted travel, even travel out, not just outside of the country, a lot of people are not even traveling beyond their neighborhood. Like they'll go to the nearest supermarket, they'll go to the nearest bookshop. They are not traveling very far to get what they need because of the fear of contact with people. So all that fear and all that minimal travel means that businesses are suffering. When businesses are suffering, they have to tighten their budgets. You don't have the budgets that you have for digital marketing. You don't have the budgets that you used to have for all the things that you used to do to make your business grow. But any business that does not grow dies a natural death. Which means, okay, you don't have money, you have tighter budget, but hey, you're still meant to grow. How do you do that? Through the franchise system. If your business can be franchised, franchise mechanism works because you can actually grow and expand your business without your own capital. You're looking at other third-party people or companies putting their capital, investing their money into your business idea, your business concept that works. This allows for growth. This allows for your business to thrive as long as you can be, what we talked about, that role a franchisor plays in growing the businesses. So as long as you can be that franchisor that becomes the developer and a trainer, then your business can thrive as you train other people to run your business as their own business, their own replicated business. So there's minimal capital outlay, and you still have growth and you still have increase in visibility. That's the interesting thing about visibility. You look at, let's take Old Town for example. When Old Town started mushrooming, and they probably started mushrooming 8 to 10 years ago in Malaysia, they were not spending a lot of money on billboard advertisements or news advertisements where we watch news and suddenly there's TV advertisements, and radio advertisements, right? So those are very expensive marketing tactics and marketing strategies. But yet, we all know Old Town. At least, I don't know anyone who doesn't know Old Town, right?
Yes.
So you're looking at them increasing their visibility through franchise mechanism. So basically, we have a lot of outlets mushrooming in different parts of KL, different suburbs. When you drive, when you see the signage, that's marketing. So that's why the franchise system also allows a brand to grow in terms of value and depth and marketing, even though there's no marketing expenses. You are doing it through all these franchisees who are now opening in different locations in that country or that area. So it's great. It's in terms of you not putting the money out there, there's still expansion and there's increase in value in your brand. So that's the first reason why it's actually a great business model during this COVID times. Second one is what we all hear daily in the newspaper. In fact, recently they were saying 3.5 million Malaysians will be unemployed or are already unemployed. And in the US and so many other countries, unemployment rate is just on the road because of what is happening. Businesses don't survive, and the first thing that gets hit is employment. So there are a lot of committed and capable and competent individuals out there in the job market now. If you speak to franchisors, that's the key thing that franchisors find. They find it so difficult to find committed franchisees, to find franchisees that are intelligent and capable. Now is the great time to actually source for franchisees, because they, without their own effort, have been retrenched. Without their own incompetency, have been retrenched. So right now, there are a lot of motivated and committed people that might be interested in your franchise. So the fact that now there's a pool of people to tap into makes it also a great reason for franchisers to thrive. But I guess now I have to go to the other point of the catch, that it can be expensive.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so let me go to that. Let me go to the catch that we have, because a lot of people say, yeah, but you're saying, Geetha, you're saying that people will be retrenched. People will retrench and you're telling them to be franchisees. How are they going to have the money to pay the franchisors what it takes to start a franchise? And that is a very valid obstacle that everyone will think about. And looking at franchises that can be expensive, right? Let's look at some at 5 million and not from borrowed funds. Franchise fee being 22,500 US dollars, training deposit 10,000 ringgit. Then the others are okay. 5% of your gross income is for advertising, 5% of sales is for royalty, and then rental. If McDonald's owns the tenancy, they'll charge 18 to 20% of your gross sales for rental. See, this is where people go, when you look at these kind of figures, say, how can retrenched people or anyone who's looking for a franchise afford a franchise? Mm-hmm. And that's understandable. So let's look at Sodis from Paris, which is a local brand. They haven't released their franchise fee. Initial capital investment is there, up to 300,000. Royalty is also not released. And marketing A&P is 10% of their sales. Old Town, more affordable in terms of franchise fee, 80,000 ringgit. And capital investment is where sometimes the hurdle is, it can go up to 1 million, right? So sometimes a lot of people go, how is it that these franchises are affordable then during the COVID times? So the tips is to avoid franchises that have high upfront costs. So if franchisees are struggling to get a franchise, these are for franchisors also to restructure their franchises, to look at models that can still push the brand out, can still make money for the franchisees and make them money as well. It doesn't need to be a huge outlet that costs a lot in terms of rental. It could be small kiosks, smaller outlets. So there are ways to still get your franchise out there during COVID times. These are examples of smaller franchises. You've got Malaysia, this is in Malaysia, which is a corn in the cup, Nelson's corn in the cup. Look at the franchise fee, it's very affordable, 5 to 12,000. It's of course for kiosk, and that's why it's affordable. So it's very important for franchisors, which big outlets who are finding it difficult to find franchisees during during the COVID period, to restructure their franchises. Initial capital investment also lower, and there's no royalty. So this is their business model where they don't charge royalty, but depending on what structure that you have, you could still charge a royalty and still make this a very good and affordable franchise.
Depends on what they want.
Totally depends on what you want. So it's not even follow this and this works, it's more so understand the market. The market is right now different.
Yes, Geetha, I have a question. You see, normally what we see when the brand is actually getting more and more famous, what we can see the franchisee fees is always increasing. Is there any case in the market they're actually dropping their franchisee fees when the market is not doing so good or is not performing so well?
So it really is, sometimes they drop. I don't see it dropping at the moment. What we see more so is restructuring of the franchises. They are okay to people not to take the full outlet. So if you take the full outlet, it's expensive. So it's not so much dropping your franchisee, but restructuring it. So like in these examples I'm giving, it's not even dropping your franchise fees. Because sometimes you're right, in terms of you build the brand for a reason. So when you build your brand, that's why you also ask for a higher franchise fee. Higher franchise fees also mean that the franchisor has already gone through helping other franchisees, so they have a very good training mechanism. So when you buy a franchise, usually from an established brand, the training of the franchisees in a very structured way is done. So there's a whole training center, or there's certain systems that they follow. It's not kind of like ad hoc. So that's what you're paying for as well. But no, not so much franchise fees dropping. Some might. It's the same thing as retail shops asking for reduced rent from landlords. Normal times they don't. So some brands might. I haven't seen the cases of it yet, but in most cases it's restructuring.
But Geetha, there's one case being viral recently, another famous coffee chain in Malaysia. So when franchisor having a problem, okay, so does it mean that the franchisee is facing the same problem? How will it affect the franchisee?
Very good question. Just like, I guess, char time and tea leaf, it affects depending on what is being argued. Depending on what is being argued in char time and tea leaf, if the entire franchise is being argued and there was a huge risk of them losing the case and losing the master franchise. So Brian Liu had the master franchise, right? So when you lose the master franchise, you have to then exercise what he did, which is your ongoing franchisees will either transfer to whoever the Taiwanese company appoints as their master franchise, or you convince all of them to go with your new brand and your new products, because you also can't be getting the products from the Taiwanese company. So there's a huge risk. So back to your question, what happens to the franchisees when there's litigation with the master franchise and the principal? It's a huge risk for the franchisees as well, because they might have gone into the franchise trusting that I'm going to have this brand, and suddenly my brand is going to be changed. So Brian would most likely also have to assure them in that case that don't worry about changing the brand, I'll still support you in terms of marketing and A&P and all of that, and drive traffic towards you. So that would definitely have been done. Yeah, but that is the risk that franchisees go into. And that's why sometimes they say be very careful of who you enter the franchising with. Make sure it's an established brand, because that is the risk that you might lose rights to using that brand if the master franchise loses the rights on that end.
Geetha, come to this, right? I have another question. Let's say, for example, just now you have explained that basically there's a shorter learning curve for franchisee. Once they pay the franchisor, they learn everything. So when come to this, right? Let's say today, if I took a burger brand, for example, burger brand, after 1 year or 2 years operation, I go and make another brand. Let's say, for example, Eden's Burger. Okay, Eden's Burger. So on that, right? As long as I don't use their brand name, but recipe-wise, packaging-wise, if I learn everything without their logo, without the franchisor original logo, which is my own logo, is it okay? Is it legal? Does it actually, can the franchisor do anything on that?
It depends on what's also in the franchise agreement. The franchise agreement can be worded such that they don't want any franchisees to enter the same field of business for 2 years. So they're not allowed to enter the same field of business for 2 years. It's called a restriction clause.
Mm-hmm.
And those kind of clauses are arguably not accepted in Malaysia. And the reason I say arguably is the law provides that you can't stop someone from exercising their skills and knowledge to earn a living. So the reason I say it's arguable is they might have said that don't take up a burger franchise, but you can take up any other franchise. So you're not limiting your skills and knowledge because you still have the knowledge of running a franchise, but don't do this type of franchise. That could be one restriction. So if you narrow down the restriction, that might be an acceptable clause. But if you put a general restriction, this person cannot do any franchises in the F&B business for 2 years, that's kind of like limiting anybody's right to earn a living, right?
Correct. So that is not acceptable in Malaysia, right?
If it's very wide, like the example I gave, you cannot do an F&B franchise, that won't be accepted. But if you narrow it down, or you cannot practice in the KL area, you cannot practice in the Subang area, you're kind of like narrowing it down, or cannot do burger, or you cannot do corn in a cup. You can do any other franchise, but don't do corn in a cup. Kind of like that, then it might be acceptable in court. The court will analyze whether are you restricting someone's livelihood.
Okay. But so far, Geetha, in Malaysia, right, is there any cases like this dispute or litigation case in between franchisor and franchisee. So far, based on what I know, is actually we hardly see that kind of cases in Malaysia, right?
There are cases of franchises being disputed. The cases that we have come across are situations actually quite scary because it's always a dispute about breaching the franchise agreement. You're not following the franchise agreement, you're doing things that I do not allow you to. So it's usually those kind of cases. So it's like any other business arrangement. I've got an agreement and you're not following the agreement. I've given you a warning and you still ignore the warning. So that usually goes to court. So there are cases. Then there are also cases where you go to court and then you lose because the franchise is not registered. The moment your franchise is not registered, any disputes become scary because when you take your franchisee to court, the franchisee will raise an objection saying that your franchise is not even registered in the franchise registry in Malaysia. That means your agreement is void. If your agreement is void, you can't even sue the person in court. So that's also been cases where the case is thrown out of court because the agreement is void.
So that is very important. So to me, that one it will come to trademark, which is actually your expertise into IP.
It comes into registering the franchise. So that really comes into is the franchise registered? That's a huge risk because you have an agreement and you have all that, but your agreement can be thrown out of court the moment you bring it to court because it's not a registered franchise. But you're right. I mean, the other thing is about trademarks. You need trademarks as well to be protected because when any business that is successful will have copycats. So as you grow in your business, as your business grows, people will try to get as close to you as possible. And when that happens, you want to sue them for trademark infringement or passing off, saying that they're passing off their business as if it's my business. So protection of the trademark is important. And in Malaysia, you register it at the Malaysian Intellectual Property Office. And it's not a difficult process, but that's actually very crucial for all business owners who want to franchise their business.
Okay, so Geetha, do you have any other example to share? Any other case?
I would like to go to the advantages for franchisor actually.
Okay.
So these are business owners, right? We talked about advantages for franchisees, but let's see what are the advantages for franchisors who are entering this market. So we talked about first two, which is why it's relevant in COVID. But for franchisors, it's also important to remember that as your business grows, if you don't franchise and it's just your own business that's growing, meaning that it's all your own managed outlets, you have more people to manage and you just have more headaches. So you have less HR problems when you look at a franchise model. You earn an income from franchise fees and royalties, but you also then only manage your team that's helping other franchisors to set up their businesses, to train them and so on. So HR issues for them in their own outlets become their own issues. It's not your issues. So it's a growth, it's a business expansion plan with less stress and less headache. So that's important for franchisors or business owners who want to franchise. These are points to note. And consistency. It's easier to control third parties that have to follow the franchise agreement and operation manual. Whereas your own system and your own business, you're always just screaming at your management team to come on guys, you got to improve. So here they're bound by it. They're bound by an agreement. And if they don't follow that agreement, you can take back that franchise from them. So there's a lot of fear element. And that's what creates the consistency in the brand. So those are the 2 points I wanted to share actually. So that's about it, Eden. So if you have any other questions, feel free to ask. We're happy to address them.
Thanks, Geetha. Okay, Geetha, thanks for your time. I think that's all about that.
Thanks guys. Thanks, Eden.
Thank you, Geetha. Thank you for sharing. I hope everyone, after watching this video, you can learn something about franchise, learn something about sharing. So if you'd like to know more about VentureGrab, more business opportunity, no matter it's buying a business, selling a business, licensing a business, or even franchising a business, welcome to watch our channel. So don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you. See you again.